welcome back to another rousing rendition of the Online Church Blueprint. I'm Andy Mage, the digital pastor for Bay Hope Church, the on-demand ministries director for Lux Digital Church, and I do stuff with Altar Live as well. I do video and content creation and all that for Altar Live. We'll talk about them in just a minute. But with our good buddy Mark Lutz from Lux Digital Church, the lead pastor of Lux Digital Church, lead and founding pastor, I guess we should say. I don't know. Titles are titles. But this is episode 7, I think. You can date and number check me in the descriptions below. I'm not real good with all the numbers and things. Episode 7 today, we're going to be diving into a little bit more of the nitty gritty, and Mark and I are going to have a conversation about what it takes to start digital teams, how to form them, how to run them, really the keys to success in your digital team. You're going to hear me give a spoiler a little bit in the front of that, but running a digital team, here's my secret voice. Running a digital team is a lot like running a physical team. A lot of the skills transfer over, a lot of the attitudes and modes and methods transfer over, and we really just kind of want to highlight those. Now, I had gotten away from this, in the last couple of episodes, but you'll be able to see in the description and the doodly-doos below if you are watching this on a fine video streaming platform, or if you are listening on an audio form, you'll be able to find this in the show notes. I'm going to have a download link for a PDF with some simple checkboxes, some simple ways to really make sure that you're following along as you're building out your teams. Might seem a little crazy, especially since a lot of this is Leadership 101, but I think we all need a little bit of a reminder as we're building out our teams. Before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder about Altar Live, the one-stop shop for church streaming, for all things live meetings, all things church engagement, and all things really platform non-specific streaming. Altar Live is really the best place for church engagement. It allows you to live stream. It allows you to turn your cameras on and engage with people face-to-face while a live streaming is happening. It allows you that pre-service and post-service community in your lobby areas. It allows you to have meeting rooms, closed off private meeting rooms like you would have for Bible studies. It allows you to have actual meetings to replace Zoom, and so much more. You can try it for 14 days for free at altarlive.com, or click the link in the description or show notes below. It's a fantastic product, honestly, and I'm not just saying that because I've been using it for a year and a half, but it really has upped the engagement level of so many churches that have been using it. So go check it out, altarlive.com or youtube.com/altarlive. Okay, let's get ready for this rousing episode of the Online Church Blueprint. Well, welcome back to another action-packed, decisive episode of the Online Church Blueprint with our good buddy, Mark Lutz. Mark, we missed you last episode. We had Tyler Sansom on the program, and he was great. He was no Mark Lutz. However, I think
man, Tyler's amazing. He's like two of me, bro.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a sweet beard, which is the question that I wanted to get to was, you've been getting this a lot from all over the place. What happened to the beard?
I got rid of it. So we went to Disney World, and we were getting ready to go into Animal Kingdom. And, sometimes I just wake up and I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm just sick of it. And I'm done with this. I feel that way about my hair frequently and want to shave my head, but my wife has pulled me off of that cliff probably about 6 or 7 times over the last 2 years. And so but the funny part is that I had like a cheap, all I had with me because I was traveling was a cheap like Barbasol like razor that came with a can of shaving cream in a plastic baggie. And I didn't even have a beard trimmer, and my beard was pretty long, and I just took it to my face with a can of, and I just shaved and I took like a full like half-inch plus long beard, like full beard to nothing with a singular razor, and destroyed it. So I almost ran out of time because we had to go to character breakfast, and so I literally almost showed up to the character breakfast with like a Fu Manchu. Because I was like out of time, and so I shaved it down to what is like a normal facial hair, not like a half beard. And I was like, Jen, can I go like this? And she's like, you absolutely cannot be in any pictures like that. And then my daughter screamed and ran from me. So we finished it, and now it's growing back. What I don't like about not having a beard is that for some reason, when my beard is gone, I get chins. Like I get like 2 extra chins in all of my pictures, and so I have to have the beard to avoid the chins.
Huh. It's a vanity project at that point. How, I guess the question that everyone is dying to know, how much skin did you take off with that one razor? Because that seems like a very perilous task.
I only cut myself one time
You
in
get
the
out
whole
of
thing.
here.
I
Get
cut myself. I cut myself one time. You know, the razors that they make today, man, are kind of idiot proof. Like they don't. You know, we are a long way away from like sharpening a blade on a leather strap in a barber. Like, you could pretty much ram a modern day razor directly into the side of your face, and it won't even cut you. So
Great. Awesome. This has been Barber Chat. Thanks for joining us on the Online Church Barber Chat.
Yep.
Your source for grooming tips. I remember, and this is going to be a quick story, but I'm bald underneath my hat. Everybody hopefully knows that. Like super bald, like to the point that I just shave my head pretty much every day. I remember, so I'm 30 something now, let's say late 30s right now. I remember in my mid 20s when I first started taking it down, the very first time I shaved my head, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was in the shower, and we were getting ready to go to some sort of musical or play or something along those lines, and I nicked myself, as you do, and I didn't realize it. And I looked down in the shower, and it looked like a murder scene had happened. And I did not understand what was happening. I got scared. I got out of the shower and immediately took a towel to the back of my head and pulled it off. And it looked like it had exploded. And I was freaking out. And so I'm calling people going like, I don't know if I can make the play. I think I might have to go to the hospital. Turns out it was a nick. Like I finally got the whole mirror back behind the head thing. Turns out it was a nick, probably the size of like a paper cut, but your head just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. So I may cut this story out, but I probably am going to leave it because I think it's hysterical.
Bleeding in the shower is the worst. I get it.
It hurts too. Okay, and let us know in the comments below if you have bled in the shower. Hey, we are moving kind of into the nitty-gritty of what it means to form digital churches, what it means to be part of digital physical transitions in churches, and obviously, here at the Online Church Blueprint, we love to really get into the how-tos. And today we're going to be talking about a how-to that I think is present in every church leader's mind, and that is how to form a team. Specifically, how to form a digital serving team. Now, Mark, that's the only thing he's been doing for the last 2 years is forming teams left, right, and center. But Mark also has a wealth of experience forming physical teams in his church, as well as I. And so you're going to see the kind of the checklist in the comments below. You'll be able to follow along with us. We're going to kind of go through some really quick steps on how to form teams. And spoiler alert, Mark kind of put this in our group chat yesterday, but spoiler alert, this is pretty much the same way that you form a team on a physical church. There might be one or two little nuances here that we'll talk about in a minute. But the first things first is that, number one, you need to identify your need. Identify the need of your team. So, Mark, when you are, let's say with Lux, what are some of the prime needs that you've had to identify and form teams around?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a lot of what we've done has been figuring out, like, what does it really mean to make disciples? Not what does it mean to run programs, but what does it mean to make disciples? So at Lux, the team that we need to actually run the service is a lot more limited than what you might need for a physical church, right? I don't need dozens of people in the parking lot and at the welcome center and at greeting and, in the children's ministry and on the worship team and on the tech team, right? We do it with a team of about 5 people. And so we don't need a lot there, but it does allow us to then position ourselves more towards like, how do we make our environment warm and inviting? And that's really important to us because the digital world can seem sterile and cold. And then how do we position ourselves to actually make disciples? And we've really channeled all of our energy into that because I just don't want to be a program-focused church. We have some programs, but most of our stuff are things like Bible studies and devotionals and prayer teams and all of the different aspects. And some of our teams are even a little bit more limited and condensed in the digital expression than what you would have in a physical church, just because our needs are less, right? And so our needs and our teams are positioned a lot more towards people than they are towards administering to and discipling people than they are towards taking care of the facility or making sure people are parked in the right spaces. And so like our teams and what would be committees for other churches, which is nightmare fuel for me, is I'm sorry if you're a church who has a bunch of committees, you shouldn't. But whatever it is, that's a tangent. I shouldn't get on it. I'll start ranting. But whatever it is that your teams are doing, you got to identify like what are the actual practical needs. And digital expressions and digital campuses have the ability to lean more heavily into the things that are most important because you actually need less people to maintain the footprint.
Yeah. So a quick example then of something you did at Lux. What would be a team that you would have to expand in a digital church versus something in a physical church?
Oh, that's a great question. Like, what is like a team that exists in a digital church that may not exist in a physical church?
Yeah.
I think like one of those is like admins and moderators. And so like people who are techie enough to be able to manage the platform that you're actually doing stuff on. To be honest, a lot of them are the same, right? Like, and maybe they're not parallel, but they're similar, right? Like you need someone to organize the church potluck. I need somebody to organize church game night, right? You need somebody to, welcome people as they come through the doors of your church on a Sunday morning. I need people to welcome people as they join their server in our Discord and DM them separately, right? You need people who will go up front and pray with people at the end of service. I need people who are actively praying for the prayer concerns that are coming to our church 24/7 over our Discord server. And so the roles are actually parallel and pretty similar. But they sort of, the functionality of them looks a little bit different, right? How we actually live out that thing is different, although the intention and the purpose behind a lot of it is the same.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so step one, pretty simple, identify the need. Moving into step two, then, you need to identify your leaders. And that's one that it could be seen as the tail wagging the dog a little bit. That leader of a team might be just you to start. It might be just you kind of grinding and you making sure that you're handling admin and you're, handling the emails and the scheduling and doing whatever you need to do. But later on down the line, you do need to identify those leaders because church is not a solo act. There are no such thing as Lone Ranger Christians. Even look at the story of Moses and Aaron. Moses is trying to do it. Dude almost fell out trying to judge thousands of people a day. Aaron and his father-in-law came to him and were like, yo, dude, you're doing bad stuff. And he fixed it. And this dude named Jethro basically set Moses right. It was totally awesome. When we're identifying leaders, obviously there's a moral sort of ethical code we have to uphold as a church. Namely, hey, make sure you believe in Jesus. And that's kind of the first and foremost thing. But Mark, when you're trying to identify a leader, what are you looking for in a team?
Yeah. Well, I think I see everybody on our team as a leader. And so I want to invest in each of them, regardless of whether they're leaders of tens or 50s or hundreds or thousands. I want to invest in each of them and help them level up their leadership no matter where they are on that spectrum. And I think that every person who joins our team is a leader and a follower simultaneously in some way, just the same as I am. Although like there's no leader over me, I'm following Jesus because he's ultimately my leader, right? I'm submitting to him, and as I submit to the Lord, there are others who submit to my leadership inside of our church and then also take leadership. But the same skill set that you need to identify leaders in your physical church is mirrored in your digital expressions as well, right? Like, how do I identify somebody who seems like they would be a good leader? Well, I look for people who are mature and aren't causing me drama and problems and who are actively participating in it and passionate about the team that they're serving on. And then I'm like, oh yeah, you should be the team leader. I know like some churches, I don't know, I guess some leaders, like they'll position people to be the leader of the organization and stuff, or the leader of the team and everything before they actually know what's going on the team. And I'm not like that. I want to get there and get my hands dirty and figure out like the nature of what actually needs to be done before I ask someone else to step in and do it. But to be fair, that's the exact same thing that I would do if I was leading a physical church right now. So It's really no different, right? And if you're wondering how to identify leaders, I keep choosing the wrong leaders. Like, quit listening to this podcast and go buy a book on it, because there's dozens of amazing books that are written on how to identify really good leaders and then how to train and equip those leaders. And then I would say if you're looking for like a universal thing to sort of like, let's get everybody on the same level and we need to sort of share these commonalities, have a covenant system, like make a covenant. Everyone has to sign the covenant that is on your team. We have one at Lux and we're developing a new one for the dream team, a new covenant. Literally right before recording this, I just got done shooting 15 videos, and 10 of those videos are part of our dream team onboarding process to get everybody on the same page. When it comes to recruiting team members and identifying leaders, clarity is kindness. The more clear that you can be with people, the better you are. Don't just take warm bodies and shove them in places, despite the fact they may hate that position. Help them to identify their spiritual gifts and their talents, and then through that, when you identify those things, you actually figure out, well, this person would be really good on this team, and maybe they'd be a really good leader there. So like when people are coming to on our team, when this new system rolls out, they will have taken a Myers-Briggs type indicator, they'll have taken an emotional intelligence test and a spiritual gifts inventory test. And all of that information is at our fingertips. And I just said it's like the Harry Potter sorting hat, right? It's going to help us determine where to send you. But just as Harry Potter got to choose Gryffindor over Slytherin, you also get to pick where you're going, right? Like we don't ever want our processes and our personality tests to supersede the power of the Holy Spirit in somebody's life. Sometimes someone needs to be on a team because they were called there, not because they're gifted there, because God equips the gifted, or equips the called. He equips the gifted as well, I guess. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but like it's a very similar skill set. But if you've never been in a physical church where you actually built a system that brings on volunteers in a way that's helpful, then you need to do that just the same in a digital church as you do in a physical church.
How do I get to be in Hufflepuff? Like, what do I have to do that?
I'm pretty sure it's some combination of being sort of like emotional and spineless. I think that's how you get in. Although I think Cedric Diggory was in Hufflepuff, and I should not blaspheme his name because he got killed by Voldemort. So
spoiler. But yeah.
But if you haven't read book 4 yet, Goblet of Fire spoiler in the description of this video.
Homeboy looked at the sky and remembered how much everyone loved him and then passed away. It was real good. Cool. So that's identifying your leaders, just like Mark said. The what is it? Caring is kindness. Communication is kindness. Like that's great. Number 3, this is one we've talked about ad nauseum. You can go back and listen to one of our earlier podcasts as well. Talking about casting vision. It's like the most important thing that you as a church leader can do. People are only going to follow vision. They will follow charisma. They will follow great speaking for a little bit, but sooner or later, they're going to fall off. People need vision, especially in a church. They need a collective. They need an organization. Casting vision is pretty much your primary job as a church leader, or one of your primary jobs. I would say one of the 3 or 4. Mark, talking about casting vision, let's hit on this real quick. When you are casting vision to a team, how are you doing that? Are you doing that through emails? Are you doing that through face-to-face conversations? Are you doing that through group text? Like, what's the method or the media for that?
Yeah, well, we want vision to saturate everything that we're doing with our teams, right? And so that should bleed out in each one of our interactions. So that has to do with our pre-service huddles when we get a touch point with our teams. That is built into our once a month dream team meetup, where we meet with all of our teams once a month to do onboarding and training, and also vision casting. That's communicated through, I do a lot of I'll film short 2 to 3 minute videos for a specific team, and then I'll drop it for them. And so I'll just walking around my house and I'll have a thought or something, that I really need to communicate with them. And so I'll send a video to my small group leaders and be like, hey, we did this thing and it really worked in my small group. And, this is helping us fulfill our vision. And so it needs to be saturated. I would say this too, if you're the type of leader, you're I don't think vision is that important. If you don't cast vision, somebody else, I promise you, will cast vision for you. And the definition of division is 2 visions, division. And so if you won't cast vision, not only will someone else, but multiple other people inside your church will, and then your church will naturally divide because there will be multiple visions. Division is 2 visions. And so you need to have a compelling vision. I met with a young man yesterday and I said, is your vision different than your pastor's vision? And he said, well, yeah. And I said, well, you're not going to have to answer for your church one day when you get to the pearly gates. So he is going to. So either get on board with his vision, or you need to go find someone else and somewhere else to worship, because you have a different vision than your pastor, and your pastor's been entrusted with the vision. And you submit to that vision, or you go find some place that matches yours. And because it's just very dangerous in the church to have multiple visions. So yeah, vision's very important. If you don't, your team will.
It's funny. I was after our service last night, I was leading one of the rooms, and we had a guide and somebody else jump in. But in that room, we had probably a 30-minute conversation and prayer time about his church, his physical church that is blowing up right now. He said there's 4 or 5 different sides. He doesn't know where to turn, and there's 4 or 5 different visions. And I was trying to get to the root of it, and he said, yeah, our pastor's been there for however many years, and he's just been real bad at communicating things, and we just moved into this new building, and I think some people are not seeing what the building is all about. And it was like, that's it right there. It's because, and I'm not blaming the lead pastor, but I'm kind of blaming the lead pastor. He didn't cast vision over why they're spending couple of million plus dollars on this building for a church of 120 or 130. That most of this could have been alleviated if the vision had saturated those teams. So just keep that in mind. Like that's a big thing. Let's move on to step number 4 here. And I'm putting this as just kind of like the general kind of hangout time in the notes for you all. I'm putting scheduled prayer times together. There's kind of 2 different ways of looking at hangout times with your teams. There's more of the fun, like, hey, we're going to, go to Dave and Buster's if you're a physical team, or online, hey, we're going to go play Fortnite for a little bit, or we're going to play Scribble, or, we're going to hang out in those ways. So there's like kind of the fun ways and team building and camaraderie stuff, but there's also the spiritual building. And I'm putting the spiritual before kind of the hangout time simply because church teams are based around this for the most part. Although, honestly, I think they're almost interchangeable. It's kind of like a 1A, 1B situation. Mark, how do you look at that? Do you look at like you're going to try to turn all your hangout teams into a spiritual time, or are you going to prioritize one over the other? What's it like in Lux?
I think it's some combination of both. I think that you have to really lay a lot of weight on community development, especially inside of digital church, because it's just not right. We talked about this before. You don't rub off on people as easily inside a digital church because you don't just bump into people. People can't watch you from across the room. So it takes higher levels of intentionality. And I think that using the precious moments that you have together with your teams to build camaraderie and community amongst one another, to develop inside jokes and to enjoy each other's company is really vital and important. Otherwise, I think it will feel very stale, very sterile, very business inside of your church. And that's not right? Because a church is a family. And I think especially, I don't know, like I know there's some churches out there that are doing digital stuff that are like all text-based, right? Like they don't really meet over video. I literally don't know how that happens because it would be so hard for me to pull off. Like I don't know how you feel like family and laugh together and enjoy each other's presence without cameras and microphones, at least, right? I'm sure that there is the ability to build community and connection and disciple people, but the family aspect of the church is so real inside of our community, and it's very deep. And that is because we've given space at the beginning of meetings, specifically, where I don't come in and just commandeer and be like, hey, let's get to business. Here's our agenda. There's always at some point where they're sharing inside jokes, or Ben is doing something crazy, or or someone's taking a shot at somebody in love, and we're just enjoying each other's company. And I think that's really important. That being said, we have really started the practice of every time we meet together as a team is breaking into rooms and praying for our church. And I give people prayer prompts because I think it's equally important that we spend time praying with one another. Yeah. The last thing I'll say about this is it doesn't have to be an either or as much with digital church, because you have more time, because people aren't getting dressed and driving to the church and then being there for a meeting and then getting back in their car and driving home. They're jumping on their phone or their computer. And so if you think about the commute, let's say the average person commutes 15, 20 minutes to your church. You can sometimes snag 30 minutes to 40 minutes extra for a meeting to actually spend time in prayer and community, because they're not doing the inconvenience of commuting back and forth.
That's a great point. Actually, I hadn't really thought about the either or thing that could happen, or the time management thing that could happen in a digital church versus a physical church. That's a great point. Ostensibly we're talking about building digital churches, so use your time wisely with that. Just know that praying with your team, that's been honestly with Lux, that's been one of the coolest things ever. And I think a lot of people might think it's weird, like, hey, I'm praying with people all over the country, all over the world. But there's something really cool when you're sitting at your computer, you got your headphones in, and you're closing your eyes, you're connecting with God, you're hearing somebody's voice, and you're not really, sometimes when you're praying with people, you're worried about like, hey, does Johnny over there have his eyes closed? Or like, man, who just walked in the building? Or like, hey, what time was it? Or, something like that. But when you're just sitting alone in your room or at your computer or at your phone or something, there's a sense of connectedness that I don't think you could get otherwise. And that's very, very cool. And so if you are out there forming digital teams, I highly, highly encourage, just schedule 10 minutes every week or every other week with your team, every once a month, doesn't really matter, something regular, to get together and pray with them and watch as the Spirit starts to move there. The one of the last things here, step number 5, and this is kind of like a wishy-washy step that can go anywhere, but that's listen to your people, listen to your team. Don't just, Mark said, you don't just walk into a meeting and just say, like, here's what we're doing, and throw your fist down and hit them with a shoe. Like there's a something that happens when people go into leadership and they stop listening to people that they're helping them, the people that are on their team. And I don't really know what that is. Mark, have you ever experienced that before?
Oh, of course I have. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's served under anybody has experienced them not listening to you before. We've all been there.
Yeah, and I think there's one of the best things, one of the most important things you can do before you actually release your team into the wild, and while you and your team are serving, and for debriefs and for pre-service huddles and for pre-show meetings or whatever, all of those things, like, you need to listen to your people. You need to make sure that they are your priority number one. There's obviously servant leadership. That's what we do in the church world, but it can be a little bit difficult, especially when you're kind of a type A person like me that is very task-oriented. Mark, right before this stream, had said, I like checking boxes off. And, like, yes, we all love checking boxes off, but those people are not boxes. Those people are definitely not, they're not tasks. Those are people with real feelings and real commitments and real emotions and real struggles and real loves, and you need to treat them as such. Mark, how do you go about doing that with your teams? How do you go about reminding yourself of that?
I mean, like, listening to people, just kind of, like, don't be a jerk. And I mean, that's just like, it's not even education on leadership or leading a digital church. It's just like, don't suck. But I think that one of the things that I would emphasize in this is it's not just about pretending to listen to people or even finding times to listen to people. It's about giving people opportunities to offer feedback. Because we just don't do that frequently inside of leadership, to give people the opportunity to give input. And I think we have a certain amount of justifiable fear about it, right? Like, what if somebody comes in and they have a terrible idea, and frequently people have awful ideas? Like, are they going to expect me to follow up on that idea? What if they come in and they say something about me and they're combative, and now what am I going to do? I think there's a certain amount of fear about that, but people need, like, there's less of a chance of some of those really negative things happening if you consistently have a place where you are receiving and open to receiving feedback. And so one of the things we do with our team every couple of months when we meet up is we do what sucks and what doesn't. And so in that, we basically say, hey, we're doing a bunch of stuff at church. What sucks? Like, what is not working? You could probably find, more, I don't know, healthy language for it, for like the 70-year-old women in your church. But I don't have those, so I don't care. So I just, it's, hey, what sucks? And then, hey, what's going really well? Like, what is actually working? And we receive feedback on both of those things. It helps us to reinforce, and it lets people feel like they're being heard, right? Like, because they're actually, and I can't get on the defensive in those moments. And I can't just step in and be like, oh, wow, that's probably one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. You got to let those ideas sit. And I learned this in youth ministry years ago. We did a youth leaders retreat every year, and we would spend literally, like, I would give everybody a giant white sheet of paper, sticky pad, and 2 of them, and one for what was going well and one wasn't going well. And as teams, they just would roast the ministry in one, and then we would present it, and then it was like, okay, now we know what we're doing this next year. And I had to be able to sit back and take that without taking it personally, because I knew it was people here who, if they were writing something that was negative about me, it wasn't because they don't like me. They love me. That's why they're here for the weekend. That's why they're serving, right? Your people love you. They care about you. They love your church. They have a heart for your church and for you. They want you to succeed. They're not here to see you fail. And the reason that people offer criticism or they offer concern is because they care, right? And too often, if you're insecure as a leader, you'll backpedal there and just have it be really hard for people to share. And if you get defensive and you don't listen, people will just immediately understand that this isn't a real thing. Like, we're not actually looking for feedback here. We're looking for a pat on the back. And then it becomes pointless. So give people opportunities for feedback, but don't be insecure, and receive that well. Don't look shocked. And give people the opportunity to really talk through things.
It's almost like self-awareness as a leader is a vital characteristic.
As it turns out, great leaders usually are not people with low emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Huh. Fantastic. I thought that was fantastic. And the last thing I want to add to all that, and the kind of the last thing that you should do as a team leader when you're forming a digital team, is to go and have fun. Not everything is super serious when you're serving. Obviously, there's going to be important parts, especially if you're on things like a prayer team or things like even some sort of hosting team. Sometimes people are going to jump into a chat on a digital thing and be talking really bad things about bad stuff, and sometimes you might have to boot them and have those tough conversations. But by and large, in my opinion, one of the biggest things that's missing in church culture today is fun. I mean, obviously, we're missing a whole lot of stuff. We're doing a whole lot of weird things that maybe are not biblical, and maybe Jesus is going to look at it and go like, I'm not sure what that was all about. But I think one of the biggest things that we need to take away from this is like, hey man, church is fun too. We're people, we're all messy, we're all kind of smelly and snotty, and we've all got a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of sin that's kind of cropped up all around us. We're forgiven of that. So why are we not, why are we acting like it's this big, huge, important thing? Now, that's not to be irreverent. We don't want to get up there and tell your mom jokes or anything the whole time. But by the same token, like, it's okay to say the word suck every once in a while. Like, yeah, man, that sucked. That's okay. It's okay to have fun with your team. It's okay to don't step over the line, but maybe get up to the line. And although this could trend into the line of like, oh man, I'm edgy. I'm the cursing pastor. Look at me. I'm not.
I am.
Well, you're not one of those though. You know what I mean. One of those pastors. Anything else on the have fun with your team? Any words of wisdom for that one, Mark?
I just love that we talked about irreverence, and we randomly opened up service last night at Lux with our worship leader doing a crazy rendition of a Blink-182 song, which we decided to do about 15 minutes beforehand. I'll only say this, like, laughter, humor, and fun is a major characteristic of our church family. Like, that is just baked into our DNA. We spend a disproportionate amount of our time at the beginning of service telling jokes and just having fun, of laughing together and enjoying each other's company. You don't need to start every meeting with your team off saying, guess what we get to do today? Save people from going to hell. I'm not saying that you're not, but your whole team knows that's what they're doing. They're not showing up to church because they think they're not doing that. They're showing up to church because they don't want people to go to hell. Like, that's why they're serving on your team. So you don't need to kick off every meeting reminding them of the eternal consequences of their decisions when it comes to serving on your team. Sometimes it's okay to just have fun with them. I think maybe one of the perfect examples of this is one of the fastest growing churches in the country is Church 901, and it is it's in Memphis. And I know Pastor Stevie there and his wife. And recently, they did. If you were familiar with The Office, they did their own version of the Dundies, where they had all of their team dressed to the nine and come out for this dinner at their church, and they had boxes of fake awards that they gave away to their dream team, and just enjoyed each other's company and shared in stories and moments together and shared in what God was doing. And it was so beautiful and super cool. And, do stuff like that. Like, go and have fun with your team.
We actually, we had a staff retreat a couple of years ago, right? Actually, the week before 2 weeks before the pandemic. We actually think someone there had COVID, which was pretty crazy. But we did our rendition of the Dundies, and my brother and my sister and I all work at this church, and somebody got the Dundee. I think we called it the Hopi. The Hopi, because of Bay Hope. Somebody got the Hopi for honorary mage, or no, best mage, because obviously my last name's Mage. And it was somebody that was not a mage, and it was like the funniest thing in the world. And so we're actually doing a staff pickleball tournament in about a month and a half. And I was on the planning committee for it, but I was on the planning team for it yesterday. And one of the things that we're doing, we're bringing back the honorary mage, and it's going to be somebody that's not a mage. And it's fun just to laugh and play pickleball and have somebody dress up in a pickle costume to give people awards. Cool. Anything to add before I split out of this and let you go do the thing that you need to be doing here?
Absolutely. Absolutely nothing to add. I mean, yeah, build teams. Digital church isn't a solo show. You need a community of people. And by the way, put their faces on the screen, not just like still images. Highlight your teams. have your teams be part of service. We did one service at Lux, our first one. I got off and I said, this can never happen again. This was the Mark show. I was the only one on camera. This can never happen again. The church is not me. It is us. And we need other people on. And from that day forward, we've had different people preaching, leading prayer, leading worship, leading any different aspect of our church. I can never be the only person on screen again. That is a genuine risk of a digital expression of the church, is that you don't just become the leader of the church, you become the only face of the church. Highlight your team and bring them in to be part of the narrative and the face of your church, so that people know it's not just you trying to build your own platform or become an influencer. That's my closing thought, and let's go.